Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM. We are very excited. We have the Italian Grand Prix at Monza this morning. This is John Massengale, and I'm in Austin, Texas, and I'm joined by Les Kaiser and Bob Varsha. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you, Bob? We'll start with you.
I'm doing great, John. I'm in a new location for this show. I'm in Jackson, Wyoming, where my son Matt, the ex-racer, lives, and I'm enjoying the hospitality of the parents of John Edwards of Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, BMW, IMSA fame. You know, John and my son Matt are old friends, so they've allowed us the use of their condominium for a week here in town, and it's fabulous.
Well, fantastic. Mr. Kaiser, how are you?
Well, I'm a bit jealous. That sounds like they're probably a lot cooler than 95 degrees up there, but I'm doing all right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was a bit warm out at COTA yesterday.
Well, we are excited. We're at the 16th round of the Formula One season, and we are at the Temple of Speed. And as usual, the Italian Grand Prix, the qualifying and practice has not disappointed. The cars are fast, but we are excited. We've got this race, and we've got Charles Leclerc on pole. We have a whole shakeup of the rest of the grid with the drivers shaking up all up and down it. So we're going to get into all of that. We'll talk about the circuit itself, and we're going to have Chris Medland, who is live at Monza, going to be checking in with us periodically, and we'll see how Chris goes and see what interviews he can get from us, and we'll get his insights as well. But I think I want to just get off and start a little bit about these grid penalties. Bob Varsha, this was honestly was kind of a mess, but it really has given us a different starting grid to look at this morning.
Oh, no question. And there's a story behind that. I mean, this is Monza, wide open, flat out everywhere, lots of room to pass, only 11 corners, including 3 chicanes, which take up most of those corners. So if you're going to add powertrain components to your pool, as they call it, your engines, your batteries, your inverters, your electronics, your exhausts, all those things, and take a penalty, with Singapore and Japan coming up, this is the best track to take those penalties because you have a chance to recover from it. And ironically, because so many drivers, 9 of the 20 drivers in this field took various types of penalties, some of them aren't penalized all that much. I mean, you look at Max Verstappen, who went through a raft of components, which sent him back, but he's going to start 7th because so many guys around him also went to the back, and he had the quickest qualifying time among them. So that's going to be a big factor. We'll see drivers coming through. Of course, Max has shown that he can come from just about anywhere and win the race. The Red Bull will be on its game here, you can be sure. But this is, you called it the Temple of Speed. It's such an anomaly of a racetrack, flat out, just about everywhere. And because of that, the slipstream, the aerodynamic toe, is incredibly important, even with these new cars, which were meant to de-emphasize it. And the slightest mistake will cost you heavily because it's so hard to make up for it. There's only 100% throttle setting, and if you're not on it at every opportunity, you're going backwards. It's that kind of a race. It's spectacular. The track is one of my favorite in the world, with the sound of the cars echoing off the trees of the infield, the old bank track that you can see in the movie Grand Prix. All of these elements add up, and of course, the Italian passion for racing and for Ferrari. The Tifosi will be out in force.
Well, one of the other big stories is, of course, Nyck de Vries. That has been a fascinating story. Of course, Alexander Albon, who came down with appendicitis on Saturday morning, and it's been a really pretty amazing having Nyck de Vries jump right in. Of course, he's a Formula 2 champion, Formula E champion too, Bob. I know you've gotten to call some races with him. What do you think about Nyck?
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, he's a very accomplished driver, has been unable to hook up with a Formula One seat. I mean, he's a favorite as a reserve driver for Mercedes, but I am surprised that he just doesn't seem to be what a lot of teams would consider, the prime candidate for a seat if they have one available. Having said that, Yeah, he becomes the first guy since the German Harold Ertl back in 1978 to drive at least 2 different cars on a race weekend. For Ertl, it was trying to pre-qualify an Ensign chassis, Boris Nunn's old team, and then he tried to qualify. He wasn't able to do that, so he went into qualifying in an ATS in the latter days of that unloved team's career. And he wasn't able to qualify that. So he never drove the cars in the race. But on a race weekend, yes, Harold Ertl in 1978 drove 2 different cars. And that's what Nyck de Vries is doing this weekend.
You know,
Hey,
I gotta
Yeah,
say
go ahead,
that
Les.
that's got to mean that they have a lot of faith and recognize his skill to do that, because there are
Yes.
2 drastically different vehicles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Les, you said that we have a clip of Nyck de Vries, right? Can you set that up for us?
Absolutely. And so, you know, this is cool because you kind of get the energy of the moment when the phone rang and he's asked about it.
Yeah, we were supposed to do a pre-qualifying show together.
We missed
I was
you.
getting ready for it in the morning with my coffee and porridge and everything, doing a pedal club appearance, but things turned around very quickly. And it was only like 1.5 hours before the first session that I kind of got informed. So the turnaround was very quick, but the team has been great and very supportive, very welcoming. Obviously, I hope that Alex is healthy and will recover quickly. But from my side, I'm never satisfied enough with myself. I think I put in some good laps, especially the second lap in Q1 was pretty good, but I still felt there was more in it. And then we made some changes on the first run of Q2, and that didn't quite work out. Obviously, the tire prep was a bit compromised in the traffic, and then on the last run, I hit a switch, which meant that the brake balance was like 1.5% rearwards, and that's how I kind of lost the rear into 4. So a bit gutted about that, but I think I'm allowed to take this anyway.
Qualifying, you need to be at 100%. You've got to be pushing the whole way round. What percentage do you think you were at, given you barely know the car, have done very little running in it?
I think in some corners I was beyond 100%,
Wow.
and then obviously resulting in small mistakes and locking up or not getting the perfect way through. But I think there were also corners I was probably slightly below. I think that the most challenging bit in qualifying is nailing or being as close as possible to 100% all around a lap. And I didn't succeed to do that, but P13 wasn't too bad of a result.
You won't start P13, minimum P9, possibly, probably P8 for your Grand Prix debut. How does that sound?
That sounds pretty cool, I have to admit. I better get some work done to get ready for the starts.
Well done, mate.
Thank you.
Guys, that's pretty amazing, actually. You just don't see somebody step in. I mean, yeah, I guess he's had a little bit of time in the car, but you just don't see him step in and out qualify their teammate across the garage, do you?
No, you don't. That was my old colleague, Will Buxton, he was talking with on the Formula One feed. I think we heard him say he changed the brake ballast by 1.5%.
Yeah.
And he wound up locking up because he wasn't ready for the brakes he was going to get when he hit the pedal. That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, 1.5%. It makes that big a difference. We commented on that yesterday in a pre-production call that they can be affected by such a tiny percentage.
Yeah, and apparently it was a switch that he bumped by accident in the course. And so, realize he's going between 2 cars just this weekend.
Mhm.
And, he's been testing in a couple different ones. But anyway, so, yeah, he accidentally bumped a switch somewhere. We might have to put that fighter jet guard over it or something.
But you heard him say 100% everywhere. You hear that theme over and over and over again. You've got to be on the throttle, full stop, everywhere you can possibly be on this track. And that's very different from a lot of other places that the series goes. So good luck to him. The Aston Martin, as Les says, is very different from the Williams, except for the engine behind the driver. So de Vries is going to have his hand full. Will was correct. 8th starting spot for Nyck de Vries. So, if he could score some points on debut, that's really all you can ask of a first timer in the car.
Yeah, this is really a fun story, and that's really one of the things I'm looking forward to today is to see how he turns out. But gentlemen, looks like we have Chris Medland, who is at Monza, and we're going to test out the cell service with the huge crowd out there. Hey, Chris, how's it going, man?
It's all good. Right now, we are clear to go. So we'll see if that holds up when we get onto what is going to be a pretty epic grid, I think.
Yeah. Well, I know that you just caught up with Toto Wolff. You want to set that clip up with us? Casey, the producer's got it ready to play.
Yeah, I did. I was hovering in the paddock when there was no signal, and I decided that I'd see who was around. And we've just had the Italian Prime Minister, I believe, walking down the paddock. So all the team principals had been lined up to greet him. And I don't know where Toto had then gone, but I caught him walking back to his motorhome to have a word about what he thinks about today's race.
Toto, you're getting absolutely swamped by fans here. It's you're a very, very popular man here in the paddock. It's a very busy paddock as well. And you're starting on the front row today. What can you do from there?
I think it's a good start to be on the front row for George, because who knows, if he has a good getaway, we might be leading the race, and then obviously that's a good start.
I mean, the car's not really suited to this track, though. Do you think you've got the race pace to potentially win it if you can get in the lead?
Well, from the pure pace, you would say rather not, and I stopwatch always tells the truth, but we don't know how the race pans out, whether there is an accident or some clever strategy to play. So let's see.
And you're normally very good at predicting where Lewis will end up when he's fighting through. What do you think today holds for him?
Well, he's starting from the back, and that's not optimum to start. But I think if he can move his way forward, and we have a safety car, I think he's a good shot in getting into the top 5, maybe.
Oh, well, we'll see if he can do that. It's going to be a fun one. Have a good race.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Chris, so give us your eyes and ears about what's going on there now.
Somebody's about to run me over. I can't work out who. So I'm trying to dodge people in the paddock. Oh, Sylvester Stallone is about to run me over. That's who.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, Sly is here with a lot of people crowding around him, as you would imagine. But he's just off into the F1 motorhome. So I imagine that's for a meeting with Stefano Domenicali and probably a lovely photo shoot opportunity. And I am going to make my way out to the grid, actually, because one, the atmosphere normally is incredible out there, and two, we want to know if you can hear me when I get out there. So it's a packed paddock. There's a lot of guests allowed in. This race has got a much bigger crowd than it's had for a long time. So last time we were here with a kind of full crowd allowed as such pre-COVID, it was 2019. They had 200,000 people over the weekend. This weekend we have got 336,000 people. So I mean, the growth just keeps coming for F1, which is great news.
Wow. Yeah, Chris, you don't want to get run over by Sylvester Stallone. That's not a good thing.
Just find out if you can, Chris. Please, God forbid, Sylvester Stallone is going to take another whack at a Formula One movie after what he did with IndyCar and the movie Driven. Oh, my Lord.
What a classic. What an absolute classic.
It's a classic something. I'll go along with that. Yes.
Yeah, that was an ugly production, wasn't it?
Well.
You had an idea. I mean, you had a comment about Toto Wolff, something about Mick Schumacher.
Yeah, it was really interesting because somebody asked specifically Toto if he would be interested in Mick Schumacher if he came available. And it was something to the effect of, if Hamilton retires, and I think there were too many ifs in it, but I thought it was interesting that he definitely at least has Mick on his radar for this. I honestly can't see Mick getting an actual seat, but he might wind up as a backup driver, or somebody back put sim time in and operate the car on sim for the sake of research. But I don't see that happening, even if Ham retires.
I want to say it's not smart money by any stretch, but there was a report in the British press leading into this weekend that Daniel Ricciardo was being lined for if Hamilton retires, and that he could be the reserve driver for Mercedes next year, which I think is a possibility. I think there's talks going on there, and you'd be mad if you're any team really not to want Daniel as your backup. But then it was and then if Lewis retires at the end of next season, Daniel goes in, and the latter part just does not seem feasible at all. Lewis himself shot it down, but I don't see that happening. There's nothing Lewis has said that suggests he's going to stop anytime soon.
That's the way
Chris,
I see it. Yep.
Chris, while you got a good signal, did you ever get to catch up with Nyck de Vries? It's been a fun story.
Only a little bit off record, just have a quick chat with him. But he had a whirlwind yesterday. He was kind of done for the weekend. He'd had his run in FP1 with Aston Martin and was starting to focus on the rest of his kind of reserve duties. Normally mean hanging around a lot and doing marketing. So he was just finishing a Paddock Club appearance on Saturday morning, got himself a coffee, and was watching the start of the F3 race. And suddenly his phone rings. It's James Vowles, the head of strategy at Mercedes, who's also involved with their young driver setup, saying, come down to the motorhome right now. So we got down there and he said, right, come with me, you're going to Williams. And off they went. So it all happened very, very quickly. But in kind of true testament to Nyck's kind of, I guess, expectations, and he's a very intense character when it comes to racing a car, he was disappointed because he didn't get everything out yesterday. He said if he'd have known the steering wheel a bit better, he pressed the wrong button at one point or caught the wrong switch and ended up with his brake bias in the wrong place on his final Q2 run, made that mistake at the second chicane. So he was kind of looking at all the, I could have done a lot better here, could have done a lot better there. Whereas the rest of us were like, you put it in Q2 on your first outing after one practice session. I mean, he had to have his seatbelts adjusted overnight in Parc Fermé because obviously the car's set up for a much taller Alex Albon. There's probably a good 6-7 inches between the two drivers. So they had to change where the seatbelt harnesses go in the car, and that had to be done under Parc Fermé regulations. So he did qualifying with, a very uncomfortable seat as well. It was a remarkable performance.
Yeah, it was fun. We had played a clip of him talking about having his coffee. But all right, gentlemen, coming up after this, we are going to continue to get you ready for the Formula One Italian Grand Prix. But we're also going to talk about the Porsche story and their breakup with Red Bull. And we'll toss around some ideas about a Porsche Andretti possible relationship. We'll talk about all that coming up after this.
Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM.
All right, welcome back to Speed City. We are getting ready for the Formula One Italian Grand Prix, and we'll be talking all about the grid and the penalties and all that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the Porsche story, because Porsche and Red Bull, we had all assumed, we'd heard that this was pretty much a done deal, that they were going to team up and bring Porsche into Formula One. And then this week, we hear that that deal is off. And I'll have to admit, because I've been hoping really hard that Andretti's Formula One effort will happen, that when I heard this, the first thing I thought of was that this would be a marriage made in heaven. And I just decided to start doing a little research and Googling around. And one of the first things I found was a tweet from Chris Medland that said the same thing.
That guy.
And I know we're all just speculating right now, but wouldn't that, Chris, I mean, this seems like that this would make a lot of sense. I haven't heard anything official, but obviously you thought the same thing with your tweet saying that you thought it was a possibility.
Yeah, but be careful. I tweet a lot. Yeah, you're right. I kind of felt it was actually more from the Honda angle originally. So if Red Bull had gone with Porsche, I was thinking, well, if Honda are kind of keen to stay in now because they're doing so well, but they're not able to stay in with Red Bull, what if Andretti, given their power supply in IndyCar, spoke to Honda about that? And, the indications from Formula One were, yeah, if they could keep a manufacturer in the sport, we'd be them way more open to adding another team to the grid. Then this happened. I was like, well, Porsche would still be another manufacturer in the sport. So that's who I'd call if I'm Michael. But I believe there's a pretty tight tie-up between Porsche and Penske, isn't there, for the hypercar setup and racing in North America. So
in World Endurance.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder how open or feasible that would be based on whether Penske would have a say in it. Maybe not. It might be just good PR for everyone, but that's where it's not quite as natural a fit as it maybe would have been if it was with Honda, given the existing tie-ups. But yeah, that's the sort of thing I think Andretti have to look at if they want to enter a team. They're going to need a full manufacturer that wants to come with them. The first kind of hints I got from F1 were that, if that happened, potentially they could have some talks and that could be a route. But they seem to think that Porsche, having already discussed coming in 2026 with multiple teams before kind of working with Red Bull, they seem to think there's more options on the current grid for them. And if you're a Williams or even a McLaren, you're probably straight on the phone as well going, hey, you could be our exclusive supplier. So We'll have to see if any of that comes to fruition first. But yeah, it's a door that could be slightly open.
And I think about what happened with both Andretti and Porsche. They were both of those deals fell apart because of control issues, right? Andretti with Sauber, Sauber didn't want to give them as much control as they wanted, and Porsche and Red Bull, the same thing. So, you still would, even if you could get those two across to the table, Porsche and Audi, you would still have the issue of what does that look like exactly? And if it's a powertrain versus, constructor type of relationship, there's all these different ways it could happen. But, also, Chris, I thought of this is that maybe one of the big reasons that the Red Bull and Porsche deal fell apart is because they're victim of Red Bull's recent success. Yeah, they won the championship last year, but they've been so dominant and everything going so well. It's like, do they even need to forge a relationship with a Porsche with the way their powertrain has been going?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I mean, I'm hovering around where Max Verstappen will be starting today's race back in 7th on the grid, and Christian Horner's not here yet, sadly. I'm going to see if I can get him to speak on this in a little bit, but he did speak about it on Friday. He did a media briefing because the Porsche statement had come out, and I think he wanted to put across his side as to why it had fallen apart, and that was one of the points he made. He said, we've done pretty well so far with our approach, with our kind of autonomy, with our flexibility. We can just react quickly. We don't have to go through. He used the word bureaucracy when you're looking with a much bigger brand that's established. So he was kind of like, look, we control us and we do things the way we want to do things and focus on being a racing team. And slowly Red Bull have just put more and more things in-house, haven't they? They now have their own power unit set up. So they didn't feel like anything. There were no indications at this stage that they needed Porsche, other than if Porsche could bring something to the table that Red Bull didn't have expertise in, which they were thinking would be around some of the hybrid technology, but then also at the right balance. And they did not want to give up half of their team for that. They didn't feel the need. So I can understand Red Bull's position. I mean, if you are dominating in the way they are right now, you don't really want to rock the boat too much, do you? You don't want someone else to come in and maybe buy half your team on the cheap. I don't think it would have been cheap, but you see my point. They've established their own success without that help. So why bend over backwards to make sure Porsche came in? From Porsche's point of view, they're a big brand. They want bigger visibility than they were going to get with Red Bull. So yeah, it's kind of clear where the two didn't quite line up.
I get part of that, but I'm not buying Christian Horner's explanation that we want to stay flexible and able to react quickly and so forth. They have just spent years working with Honda, and the Japanese companies are notorious for operating by committee, that everything has to go through the high command. There has to be consensus and all the things we associate with the Japanese culture. So the idea that that Porsche, that the company with this incredible racing legacy, and partly due to the fact that they are able to react quickly and they do make changes and so on, I'm just not buying that there was a culture clash there among management, if you will. We talked about this on a previous show. Supposedly, Porsche thought they were buying part of the team. And then apparently they sat around the table and said, Red Bull said, no. You're buying half of our engine program, Red Bull powertrains, not even Red Bull Technologies, which does race car design for their two teams. So I think there's a lot more to this story that will come out. Now, whether Porsche would throw in their lot with a brand new team like Andretti, or do they want an existing setup with someone else, is another story as well.
I think
you are correct there. That's exactly how they looked at it, was that Porsche said we expect it to be on equal terms at team as well as power unit. Whereas you're right with the Honda setup, Honda was just a power unit supplier. They had no team stake or team control. So Red Bull still got to run the whole team. They didn't want to give up any of that power and have what they felt their kind of setup changed a lot and slowed down. But there's a lot more, like you say, to come out on that front. I just don't think that I don't think either side's particularly happy. I just wonder, though, now with whether Porsche would be more willing to do something with Andretti, because Audi's coming in and doing something with an established team already. it's kind of a different approach, isn't it? They're going to need two unique approaches as two brands under the Volkswagen Group umbrella. They, if they both do the exact same thing, it doesn't quite seem to make as much sense to me.
I agree. I think there's an opportunity. I mean, historically, I love the history of Andretti and Porsche together, those two names. So no quarrels about them returning. I think if they were to work out a partnership, one of them that might work is Andretti owns the cars, Porsche owns the drivetrain, and then they each get a driver, for instance. But Andretti's in charge on race day. I think something to that effect would be most effective and marketable, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that, Les. I mean, this is going to be really, really fascinating. I keep hearing that the Andretti effort, from commentators all over the world saying, they've lost momentum. But they've lost momentum. But we got to wait and see what happens with that. We don't know what's going to happen. But guys, we have a couple of clips from the drivers yesterday after qualifying, and I want to start with Charles Leclerc.
I had a bit more doubts than that, but I was quite confident that we could make it, and we did. So I'm very happy. The feeling was great since FP1 yesterday, and I'm very happy that we did a step forward from yesterday to today. Race pace, I'm also quite confident. The feeling is really good. So let's see how it goes tomorrow.
Max says he doesn't know where he starts. Maybe it's P7, maybe it's P4. None of us can figure it out. He says it's going to be pretty easy for him to make it to P2, but from that point on, the fight is with you. He doesn't know if he's got the pace on you. How much fun is it going to be out there tomorrow? The fight between you two championship contestants in front of this amazing Monza crowd.
I think it's going to be a great race. I mean, I expect us to be pretty close, but on the other hand, we've got two very, very different car characteristics. For once, we are quicker in the straights, and they are faster in corners. Let's see how it goes.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Bob, I see you smiling after that.
Well, I'm just anticipating exactly what Charles Leclerc is talking about. Battling, toe to toe on an equal footing with his old friend Max Verstappen. Obviously, people who are aware of the troubles Ferrari has had this year are going to be thinking, well, how are they going to find a way to mess this one up? But every now and then, even a blind squirrel finds an acorn. So, if Ferrari has a good day, I mean, Charles Leclerc could delight this crowd of Tifosi and himself by being able to engage with Max Verstappen and Red Bull and win on the day, which would be spectacular fun to watch.
All right. Well, coming up after this, we are going to break down the entire grid. We're going to see what else Chris Medland can scrounge up for us out there in Monza. So stay tuned. We'll be back after this.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM.
The Speed City F1 pre-race show on SiriusXM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Stop today's most sophisticated cyber attacks at the office, the racetrack, and everywhere in between. Learn more at crowdstrike.com/XM. All right, Mr. Bob Varsha, I want you to walk us through the grid after the crazy grid penalty shuffle that we had.
Just before Bob does that, he's going to get to seventh place. He's going to find Max Verstappen. And I've got Christian Horner here. And Christian, Max has won 2 of the last 3 races from further back than this. So I guess your eyes are still on victory today.
Well, it's a different challenge here. First thing is surviving the first couple of chicanes and then get into the race from there. And, obviously, Charles has got a great advantage starting on the front row, but we've decided to take that penalty and, hopefully we can make good progress from here.
Yeah, and you knew it would be 7th, didn't you? You weren't like us all confused yesterday. You were certain it was going to be P7.
Yeah, when we got off the pit wall, we knew where we were.
And you don't seem to have the top speed that you've had at certain racetracks. Is there a different kind of setup you've gone for this weekend? And is it going to make your life any harder today?
Well, let's see. I mean, we've tried to focus more on the race than outright one lap qualifying performance. So let's see if it works. It's hotter. Tire deck could be an issue, and we're just trying to avoid sliding around as much as possible.
And the other big story we've had this weekend, earlier in the weekend, Porsche put out a statement saying that they wouldn't be continuing negotiations with you, or both sides had agreed not to continue to negotiate over 2026. Why was that? What kind of went wrong, and why wasn't it right for Red Bull?
I think Red Bull, has always been very clear about what it wants for the future. You know, we made the commitment to become a powertrain manufacturer 18 months ago, and of course it would be silly of us not to have, exploratory discussions with, a great brand like Porsche. But we're very clear on what the DNA of the team is and the way that we operate, and obviously. There was exploratory discussions, but obviously they didn't progress any further.
And Honda have done a great job, though, with this year's power unit that you've now taken on development of and working on. Is that a partnership that could continue longer term into 2026? Because it seems to be working sweetly.
I mean, who knows? I mean, we're very focused on producing our own power unit. We got 3.5 years to work out if we want to, what partners we want to work with. So plenty of time.
Thank you very much for your time, Christian.
That's pretty fascinating, Chris. That's awesome that you got him. I wonder, it's really pretty crazy that they're developing their power unit. I know they got a server load of data and information from Honda, but still, and probably a truckload of hardware, but it's still fascinating. But Bob Varsha, you want to take us through the grid?
Sure. And I'll offer this caveat that for those of you watching on YouTube, the grid that is posted on the screen may have no relation whatsoever with what I think the grid is. But here we go anyway. On row one, the clear pole sitter, fastest in qualifying, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari with his new yellow uniform that I'm still kind of on the fence about. But it's his 8th pole of 2022, the most for Ferrari since the heyday of Michael Schumacher in 2004. And keep in mind, Charles Leclerc won this race at Monza from pole back in 2019. Next to him, George Russell in Mercedes, who was only 6th quickest in qualifying, but promoted to 2nd due to penalties to guys like Verstappen, Sainz, and Hamilton, who were around him. It's only the 2nd top 3 start for Mercedes this year, and interestingly, both have come from George Russell. On to row 2, Lando Norris, McLaren, 7th in qualifying, equaling the best start for McLaren this year, that being Imola, both in Italy, interestingly. Next to him, his teammate, Daniel Ricciardo, who was 8th in qualifying, but he gets his 3rd Q3 run of the season, beaten by his teammate for the 14th time in 17 races, but he is the defending Monza winner. And I mean,
it's interesting you should be talking about McLaren right now, because I'm going to cut you off to talk to McLaren team principal, Andreas Seidl. Andreas, you're stood right between your 2 cars. 2nd row is still yours. What can you do from here?
First of all, obviously great starting positions. We will try to hang in there as long as we can. We know there's cars behind us that are a lot quicker. At the same time, you've seen in previous years, not that easy to overtake here. So let's get to the first corners. Also with both cars, I'm always extra nervous when both cars are so close together, and then settle into our race. Try to finish as high up as possible.
Well, you've mentioned both cars. Daniel as well, performing well. And you're the only team with 2 cars at the front. Can you use that to your advantage?
I hope so. I hope it's an advantage for the strategy as well when it comes to overcutting or undercutting. We have prepared different scenarios, so I feel well prepared. Lando and Daniel were in great shape so far this weekend, so just looking forward now to get going.
Good luck today. Thank you, Andreas. Sorry about that, Bob.
Spoken like a racer. That's quite fine, Chris. We're up to row 3, which is occupied by Pierre Gasly in the first AlphaTauri, who was just 9th on the timesheets, but he was in Q3 for the first time in 8 races. Next to him in the 6th spot, Fernando Alonso for Alpine, who did not post a time in Q3, so he will start from 10th in his first Q3 appearance at Monza since 2014. With row 4, we now start getting into the penalties. The highest ranked penalized driver, Max Verstappen for Red Bull, 2nd quickest in qualifying, the fastest of the 9 drivers taking penalties. But keep in mind, he won from 10th in Hungary and 14th in Spa. So don't be at all surprised to see Max coming through. He will start next to Nyck de Vries in the Williams. You've heard his story. Call up at the last minute when Alex Albon fell ill with appendicitis. De Vries also practiced Sebastian Vettel's Aston Martin this weekend. Not the first such occurrence, but as we said, the first since 1978. And making Q2 on debut in a strange car matches his teammate Nick Latifi's total for this season, I think, which says a lot about Nyck de Vries. Then we have row 5, which is Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo. That equals his career best qualifying spot in the 9 spot. Next to him is Nick Latifi, who was out in Q1 and more than 4/10 of a second slower than his teammate de Vries. But Williams has 2 cars in the top 10 for the first time in 5 years. So good on him. On row 6, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. Let's see where I'm jumping around the grid here, looking for what I wrote about each of these drivers. Vettel, 17th in his final Monza qualifying, 7th in Q1. His 7th failure, his elimination in Q1 was the first. Okay, let me start over in English. Failing in Q1 for the 7th time in 8 races. But this is where he won his first pole and race for Toro Rosso as a young lad back in 2008. So we'll see if he can recapture some of that magic. Starting next to Vettel, his teammate Lance Stroll in the other Aston Martin. The first time he's been eliminated in Q1 at Monza, which is typically a very good track for Stroll. Row 7 will be Sergio Perez, who is another of the penalized drivers. He was 4th in qualifying on basically a quiet weekend for the Mexican and out-qualified by teammate Verstappen for the 8th straight race. Starting next to him, Esteban Ocon, who was 11th in qualifying, starts 14th, out-qualified by Alonso for the first time in 4 races. On row 8, Valtteri Bottas and Kevin Magnussen. Bottas in the Alfa Romeo qualified 12th on the timesheets, back in Q3 after missing out on Q3 twice in 2 most recent races after 148 successes. Next to him, Kevin Magnussen, who was shaking his head after qualifying, only timed in 19th and sat in the garage shaking his head after losing 2 push laps to violation of track limits. So that could be a factor in today's race. On row 9, Mick Schumacher in the second Haas, 20th in qualifying. He had clutch issues, did not get a lot of practice laps, it must be said. This is the 3rd time both Haas Ferraris have been eliminated in Q1 this year. Next to him, Carlos Sainz, 3rd in qualifying, 1st of the Packers, but given all the changes that were made to his powertrain, he will start back there on the outside of row 9. And row 10, the final row, interesting pairing. In the 19th spot, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, who was 5th in qualifying. And last year, Valtteri Bottas, his teammate in the Mercedes, hit the podium from 19th. So Lewis Hamilton may have something to say in this race. At least it'll be fun to watch. And the last starter, Yuki Tsunoda for AlphaTauri, 15th in qualifying, sat out Q2, relegated due to powertrain changes, and his 5th reprimand for dangerous driving this season. That earns you an automatic penalty. So there we are. Not my greatest performance in running down the grid, but it is not our average Formula One grid.
Yeah, not your average grid. Speaking of Yuki Tsunoda, Bob, what do you think about what's going on with him with all those? He gave himself a hard time about what's gone on.
Well, yeah, Tsunoda's been an interesting story this year. They've had to hire a physical trainer because he wasn't in shape for Formula One when he got to the team. Then they had to hire a psychologist to try to help him control his volcanic temper and his bad language on the radio that gets out in front of the world audience. And, I wonder, with Honda no longer officially in Formula One, I wonder if Yuki Tsunoda no longer has the corporate support that brought him to AlphaTauri in the first place. I'm not sure we'll see Yuki Tsunoda next year, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess that wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't. So, hey, you talked about Lewis Hamilton coming from the back. We have a clip of Lewis Hamilton talking about his qualifying and race today, and I think the producers got that one ready. So let's hear from Lewis Hamilton.
Hey, man. God. I just failed so badly in trying to explain aerodynamics.
You should get the team to do that.
No. They asked me about the aerodynamics, and I was trying to explain it, and I realized I'm really not an aerodynamicist. So.
It's okay. It's okay. You got more than enough world championships to make up for that. It's all right. Lewis, we always knew it was going to be a back of the grid start for you, a P5 on the day, but the real story, I guess, is the gap. It was 1.8 at Spa. It's 1.5 today. It's the quickest lap of the year. 1.5.
Well, it was 1.7 for us in Spa.
Okay, sorry. 1.7 and a bit.
0.1 does make a difference.
But 1.5 around here. Like, that's the story, isn't it?
Yeah, but we know what it is, and we just can't do anything about it in season. So, but we know where that issue is, and we're working towards making sure that we don't have that next year. I guess if anyone's anxious, it's just, can we make that change for next year and apply it? But the truth is, we do really have an amazing aero group, and we all put every single one of us, we're going to lose as a team. We all put our hand up and say we didn't do a great job this year, and we take that on together. There's not one individual or one group that's more to blame than the other. But yeah, definitely coming to it's a frustrating season because the last race the car felt underneath, and all of a sudden, hey, this is a racing car, and then you go to here, and it actually doesn't feel bad, but we're just miles away. So that's like mentally, that's kind of a hard one to get around,
How do you do that then, going into the race tomorrow, knowing that you were the team to beat in Zandvoort and very, very nearly got a 1-2 out of it, to starting at the back with a car that doesn't have the pace that you need for the Grand Prix?
You just always have to try and approach it regardless of the situation with the glass half full. And I have no idea what we can do tomorrow. It could be, in the worst case scenario, we'll be stuck behind and just following everybody in 18th place, or whatever it is, for the whole race. I'm sure the best that can ever happen is we get into the top 10 and we get some points, and that's got to be the goal. So I'll just do the work tonight. I will use the opportunity that I made the mistake and it's put me in this position to have to have a new engine, and I'll use the experience to just work on my racecraft. It needs work, so I'm going to brush off some of those damn cobwebs and get some good overtake maneuvers tomorrow if I can.
So I think we learned a couple of things there. He's not an aerodynamist, but more so structurally, there is something significant wrong with the car. And the reason I say that is because they've got the fix, but not this season. It's too far into the season. They can't make a significant change to the car. And he talks about a fix for the next season. So that was the interpretation I took of a few comments within that.
Mm. Yeah, and the fact that he says he has to work on his racecraft, I always find that funny when Lewis says that. Well, that's why he's so good, because he's always trying to get better. All right, gentlemen, we are going to take a pause here, and when we come back, we'll be just about 10 minutes from the race right here on SiriusXM.
Hi, guys. This is Pierre Gasly, and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM.
CrowdStrike presents Driven in 60. Our digital world is more than just interconnected, it's interdependent. And because of that, security is a top concern for every organization. The Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team knows they're a potential target for a host of digital attacks, which is why they leveraged the CrowdStrike Falcon platform to deploy end-to-end security solutions. CrowdStrike revolutionized cybersecurity by harnessing the speed and power of the cloud to identify and stop the most sophisticated cyber attacks. Our cloud-native Falcon platform protects and defends organizations against increasingly complex threats, so you can have the peace of mind to focus on your business momentum, not what's trying to stop it. That's protection that powers you. To learn more and to try CrowdStrike Falcon free today, visit crowdstrike.com/XM. Love CrowdStrike, a big supporter of motorsports all over the world. All right, Chris Medland, you are in Monza, and you got an interview for us. Set it up for us.
I have indeed, as we get a flyover of a massive plane and the Italian Air Force. I swear they said they stopped doing that, but it still looks so impressive. I'm glad they haven't. So yes, I managed to bump into our old pal Helmut Marko again, because obviously we had Sunday night after the race in Zandvoort. He gave us that update on Colton Herta, and it seemed to have got a bit quiet. There was no announcement here, so I wanted to know if that was the end of the pursuing that Red Bull were doing, or if there's more to it. So here's Helmut.
Dr. Marko, we'll start with today's race. We've got Pierre up here on the third row, Max just behind him in seventh. Is this a race that Red Bull can still win, though?
I mean, we won in Budapest from P10, in Spa from P14, but Ferrari seems to be really quick here, but I think we have a good race set up, and at least we will try it.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting to watch what Max can do coming through. Now, we spoke on Sunday night in Zandvoort, a lot of excitement around Colton Herta. American fans were very happy to hear that you want to bring him in. Have you had any more information from the FIA about whether that will be possible?
No, we don't have an answer yet.
Have they given you any time frame for an answer? Is it looking likely? Because reports...
Will be around latest the end of the month.
Okay, you still hopeful?
Yes, we are still hopeful.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for your time. Very loud here on the grid, but there's Helmut Marko talking a little bit about Colton Herta.
Well, I'm glad to hear that he's still hopeful, Chris. I think that's probably the number one thing.
Yeah, exactly. It was some other reports suggested that it was already a no, and that the FIA had said it wasn't going to happen. But the main thing the FIA have come out and said this week is that they won't be pressured by any teams into anything, and that they'll be robust with sticking to rules. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't then apply their rules in a certain way that says that he can come in. So it wasn't that a decision had been made. It doesn't sound all that positive. And we discussed it last week, didn't we? That I still struggle to see where the exemption opens up. But there is going to be a meeting tomorrow of team managers with the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. They're going to talk about on-track matters, apparently, but I wouldn't be surprised if just there someone can give a nudge and say, look, at some point we need to look at this super license points issue because it's not good. But we'll see if it rumbles on a bit longer. At least that's time for Red Bull to keep stating their case and seeing if they can find a way of getting Colton onto the grid next year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask all you guys about, we got a lot of comments online about the first lap and what to expect. But this could get interesting. Chris, we'll start with you.
Well, I'd love to say I know what to expect. We've seen some bad starts in the junior formula so far. It tends to be with the spec cars and their clutches that you do get some big differentiation, but any driver that gets a bad start here is going to pay for it because it's a long run down to turn one. And Pirelli say for a driver starting on the soft tyre, they'll gain a 6-meter advantage given the same start to a car that's on the medium tyre. So that's something to look out for when we get the launch. But then, it's going to be fraught with danger for the likes of Verstappen. I mean, he's alongside De Vries, who's making his debut. He's got Joe just behind him. Obviously, Gasly and Alonso ahead will probably get their elbows out because there could be a big points return on offer. The big thing here, as we've seen in some recent races, is that you can get a DRS train and make it very hard to pass. If a car's on its own, you can get by it. But if they get into a train, it can be difficult. So the first lap, they will be robust. And if you're, I think, Hamilton and Sainz at the very back, you're probably going to sit back and let it unfold. Make sure you're not caught up in anything. But Verstappen can't do that in the middle, nor can Perez. So it will be really interesting to see how the two Red Bulls sort of fare coming out of it.
Mm-hmm. Bob, what do you think?
Well, I agree with everything Chris said. There is new repaving down at all of the chicanes, 3 of them. And Pierre Gasly said something interesting about how George Russell, not Gasly, said there's 2 different kinds of paving, as I understand it. One right on the racing line, and then a different kind of paving off of that line. You can see it when you look at the pictures of the race, all the dark black patches at the chicanes. I'm not sure quite what he means by 2 different kinds of paving. I don't know why you would do that, but he says it makes a difference when you drive. So in addition to all the usual hubbub, for all the reasons Chris just described, guys are going to have to be careful about what's under their tires before they brake and turn in and accelerate and all that sort of thing. So the first chicane is always exciting here. I recall last year where Hamilton and Verstappen wound up in a steaming pile of junk in the gravel trap. And that could certainly happen again among any 2 drivers in the field. So it's going to be exciting to watch them sort themselves out for sure.
And just because I know how early it is for you guys and how what a great job you do at getting up early for every race, but the junior races that happened before this Grand Prix, so F3 and F2 were at 8 a.m. this morning, the first race started. We had lots of interruptions, red flags, multiple safety cars, loads of incidents in every support race we've had. So we haven't had a single, even slightly clean race so far today. So I don't know if that's just going to be the driving standards in the junior formula. Sadly, it took Logan Sargent out of the F2 race. He got caught up in an incident with Jack Doohan that wasn't Logan's fault. Jack Crawford did well though and got on the podium in Formula 3. But yeah, they were full of incidents and drama. So I'm hoping we're going to see the same in the F1 race.
You just mentioned a name I got to ask about. Jack Doohan was seen over in the Alpina garage, and if that name sounds a little bit familiar, Mick Doohan, the world champion Australian motorcycle racer, this is his son.
Mm-hmm. 5-time world MotoGP champion.
Oh, yeah.
Was Mick Doohan.
So,
and Mick's always here too. He supports Jack at every race, so Mick is always nervously watching on from the paddock and the garage.
There's an interesting connection there because the story goes that Michael Schumacher, being a huge aficionado of high-performance motorcycles, named his son Mick in honor of Mick Doohan, the great MotoGP champion.
Wow, I never knew that.
I didn't know that, yeah.
Yeah, check it out. May not be true, but makes a good story.
Hey.
All right, guys, we're down to just about 2 minutes left, so let's get some predictions in here. Why don't we start with you, Mr. Kaiser?
All right, I'm going to go with Max, Leclerc. I want to see Sergio charge up from the back.
Okay, I like that. What about you, Chris Medland?
I'm going to go with Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris.
Ooh, I like that. Bob Varsha?
Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell.
Okay, I like that. I am going to go Leclerc, Verstappen, Daniel Ricciardo. I'm voting with my heart on that podium there a little bit, but this is the best start he's had in a while, and I would love to see Daniel Ricciardo. He's got to be feeling a little bit better about where he is because he just looked really, for every angle you can come at, he just looked really down last week. So hopefully we'll have a better race. Gentlemen, we are under a minute left. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in on SiriusXM. And of course, let everybody know that we're going to have Chris Medland again with us live after the race. You can stick right here.
Sorry.
You can hear the entire race right here on Channel 81 on ESPN XTRA, and we'll have our 1 hour post-race show. And I want you to write down the phone number because we didn't take any calls in the pre-race, but we like to take them in the post-race. The phone number is 512-643-5483. 512-643-LIVE. And write that number down and give us a call during the post-race show because we want to get your feedback and see what you thought of the race. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll talk to you after the race.
Ciao, y'all.